Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Subnet Show. I am your host, Gabriel Cardona, and I am joining you today from the Coliseum. No, I'm back in San Francisco. This was a picture that I took last week. I wanted to swap it out and maybe brag on some of my cool world adventures, as a humble brag, I guess would be the best way to say it. But I am joined tonight by my amazing co-host, who I'm just so grateful that he joins me every week. He's an absolute block star, the man with the most cats in crypto, Connor Daly. What is that, my friend?
Not much, man. I am fully recovered from my battle with COVID, and I am very happy to be my normal self again. Finally going to the gym again after almost a month of irregular activity with Summit and then COVID. So yeah, super happy to just be getting back into my normal routines, honestly, because it was all that travel, coming back, having a couple days of like almost normalcy, and then another almost 2 weeks of COVID, and then now finally getting back to real life. So excited to be back, excited to be doing real work, excited to be doing the show with you, not having to cancel, and
Safe
excited
to
you're back in
say,
the US, back in reasonable time zones again.
yeah, and I'm through the jet lag. It wasn't too bad this week. Monday and Tuesday were a little there, but I'm feeling good today. So I just take a walk in the daytime around noontime, try and get the sun on my body and get my, is it circadian rhythm? Is that the way it's pronounced? I try and get
Yeah,
my
yeah.
body's rhythms dialed in, and I think that's the best way. I've always heard, some of these sound like the farmer's almanac, farmer's almanac kind of cures. I don't know how legit they are, but I've always heard if you eat at your regular times, if you try and go to sleep, if that's what jet lag is, and then if you get sun on your body, it's all about getting your rhythm, getting your body's natural rhythm back in place. So I have had jet lag sometimes be absolutely brutal. I didn't seem to get it so bad when I was a kid. It seems I get it worse now, but when I was a kid and I traveled, I didn't have to do work specifically. Now I've got to be dialed in on certain hours. So maybe that's why I've noticed it so much more. But yeah, would it be safe to say that you kept the COVID to yourself?
I did not transmit it to the fiance, which was the
Good
biggest
man.
achievement, but it was a real pain for us. She was out of the house all week at hotels and friends' houses,
Wow.
so
Yeah.
I was all alone at home. I played a lot of video games. I had a blast.
Nice. Cool.
Finished my Horizon Forbidden West playthrough. Started some Elden Ring.
Nice.
Got caught up on some TV. So yeah, there's
Cool.
some perks to having persistent headaches and being unable to, be a human. But
Nice. So as you guys at home watching can probably tell, it's just us two this week. We had a very cool guest lined up, and they just had to shuffle around at the last moment, and we were unable to get anybody to step in. So we figured, hey, it's just an opportunity for us to chat. And there's a couple of new news items that we could go over, and there's always something happening in the ecosystem. But more than anything, we wanted to just make sure to always push the ball forward and always get a chance to check in on everybody out there and make sure we're all doing good here. And so there has been a little bit of news that has been brewing that impacts the members of the Subnet show a little bit, Connor more so than myself. So I figured I would pass the mic to Connor to kind of bring us up to speed on the state of affairs in his world.
yeah, so as you might have seen in my Twitter thread that went live earlier today, I say this is my reminder for myself that I have to finish writing it. Uh, yeah, so I am no longer a part of the Dapp Squad at Ava Labs. I have transitioned my role to now be on the platform team. They focus on developing custom subnets, and so this is a pretty cool change for me. I'm really excited about it. So yeah, many of you know my work on the Dapp Squad. I worked on Pangolin for a long time, and I've done work with a lot of the NFT marketplaces in the ecosystem. But now, we were kind of just at a little bit of a crossroads, and we were trying to figure out like what Ava Labs' involvement in the dapps space should be. And as a platform kind of provider, as the people who develop, do the main development for Avalanche, we did not want to necessarily compete with our own ecosystem and develop applications, because if you develop the Ava Labs NFT marketplace or whatever, then that kind of has a tendency to become like the official product on the platform, and it can disincentivize people from building. And so it's kind of little bit of a long drawn out process, but we kind of decided it was time to make the hard decision and de-emphasize our dapps work. We still wanted to have, people with smart contract experience on staff for helping a lot of the random areas of the business function, but we weren't actually going to be building products anymore. And so, we kind of scattered to the winds a little bit. And myself, I wanted to really focus on putting creative work out there. And I think I landed at the best possible place to do that, which is doing subnets. And obviously doing the subnet show, already well positioned to talk about that. But I'm probably about like a week into the job right now, and so I'm still very, very early. But I'm kind of working on my first custom precompile right now, and just super excited about the future of where we can take subnets and all the new cool things we can do with them.
Yeah, so that's obviously big news. We're going to deep dive into some of the stuff you worked on while you were on the Dapp Squad. That was actually how Connor and myself very first connected. So to give you guys sort of the story, I am the head of the developer relations squad. Technically, we have a very flat org chart, but of course there is some, there's a little bit of hierarchy there, but we tried to maintain a pretty flat org chart on the engineering side of things, and we've done a really good job of that. When Connor very first joined the team, he landed what at the time was called the Hydra team. Hydra is like a multi-headed beast. And that was kind of because it was just a mixed bag of projects which didn't have a home, kind of landed in the Hydra team. And so I was the head of the Hydra team prior to it kind of breaking up into the developer relations team. And Connor landed on squad, I think is the correct word, landed on the squad I was the head of. And I remember I've told this story before, but I remember when we very first met, I was like, man, I would love to work on a project with you. And I remember kind of like bringing this like energy, like, hey man, I want to work with you. And he was like, well, I'm on your team, dude. And yeah, let's see how that works out. So his vibe was very skeptical, for what it's worth. That was the vibe I felt when I first, he was like, who is this guy? What's up? And so, then he started working on Pangolin, and things worked out, and we got fleshed out to another, the Dapp Squad got created, and the developer relations team sort of got formalized. And then there was some extra work that needed done on an NFT marketplace, which is what Connor was building at the time. There was some Web 2 stuff that needed to be done. Basically, we had to architect out, Connor did a great job of architecting out this AWS and Google Cloud service, and this architecture, and we were using like no kidding, like 15 different AWS services, and it was a pretty cool architecture, and I learned a ton. And so I got brought in to do the Web 2 stuff, and so I did a bunch of the backend web services and fleshing out how the keys got delivered from Amazon and how they got stored over here. And it was pretty good. It was one of the nicest architectures I worked on. We got ultimately Goon signed off on it, and Patrick signed off on it. It was very, very cool. And so that was when I first started working with Connor. And that was when I think we did 10 weeks straight with no breaks. I'm pretty sure that was when I hit the wall. It was on the 10th weekend. I was like, I'm done, man. I'm done. I'm like butter that's stretched over too much bread, dude. I can't do no more. And so like that was when
you say you learned a lot, that means it was really hard.
It was.
There was a lot of learning to be done.
Yeah, it was the most challenging. It was the most I've worked since I was at Truly in 2011. So if that gives you a sense, in the past decade, I have not thrown down like that. But as always, it was rewarding. And really out of it, I got the relationship and the friendship I have with Connor, because really we got forged, our friendship got forged through that time of just a lot of pressure, a lot of deadlines, a lot of high priority stuff. And that's what it feels like to be successful. I always say that kind of as a joke, but kind of in honesty, like, what does it feel like to be successful? It feels like deadlines and pressure and a lot of stakeholders, and, a lot on the line where you don't want to screw it up. And that's kind of when I do my best work and I learn the best, because when there's stuff on the line and you can't really blow it, you'll figure it out. You'd be surprised what you'll do to make sure you don't blow it. And so, yeah, Connor and I kind of met then and really got to connect over that work. And then at the time I had wanted to do the Subnet show. I had already had in my mind, like, I'm going to create a podcast around Avalanche. It's just too big of an opportunity. And so Connor actually came on as the very first guest. I don't know if you guys go back and rewind the YouTube videos to the very, very first one, but Connor was a guest. And the chemistry was so good that I just hit him up afterwards. And I was like, man, do you want to like be a regular? In fact, do you just want to be my co-host? We can just be co-host on this. Unfortunately, he said yes, and I'm very grateful. I say it every week, and I mean it. I'm incredibly grateful. Connor's is super smart. He's a block star, no question about it. And so I'm incredibly grateful that he went on the journey with me. And so far, it's been very rewarding for me. And I believe that it's going. Our best days are still ahead of us. So that's just kind of a nice bring you guys back up to speed on how we first met and how the Subnet show got started. And so I guess, as you wind down your time on the Dapp Squad and as sort of you roll up your time onto the platform team, I guess before we sort of dig into the platform team, let's sort of wrap up the time on the Dapp Squad. So can you give me like the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Dapp Squad journey?
Just real quick, you gotta give me a moment to respond to the
Okay,
previous
please,
story,
please.
a little bit. Yeah. So yeah, no, I mean that really was it. I was not as skeptical as you think at first. I had fun with it, like, oh man, this guy knows a lot
I
about
must have
Bitcoin.
misread your body language.
But yeah, no, yeah, I had a great time working with you. Terrible time working, just in general. But yeah, it's just interesting those times that they test you and they kind of like show you what you're made of. And I was really hard, but I will say like a lot of good has come for me personally out of that, I think. And being able to prove to people that like when shit's tough, like you can deliver, and like being in that kind of environment and surviving it, because that was very much a survivorship kind of environment. But yeah, no, and I think one of the things that I just, I've actually really wanted to do a podcast for probably a decade now. I first got into podcasts in like 2008, 2009, and I didn't want to do one right away, but at least from like probably like 2012, 2013 onward, I've been like super interested, but just never really been able to find the exact right topic or the exact right co-host, because everyone's always interested when you ask, but there's not that many people who can put in the work, because I have a great time doing the show with all you guys, but for the audience, but it's work. Like it's not just showing up for an hour. You also have to like book guests, and then sometimes guests are flaky and you got to follow up a few times. Then you have to edit the episodes. Then you have to like make thumbnails. Then you have to realize your thumbnails suck and you need to figure out how to make better thumbnails. And then you got to think strategy and all this stuff. And it takes time, it takes energy. And I've definitely gone through periods of just not really been interested in putting in the time, but you still got to show up at the end of the day. And I think you've been a fantastic co-host, and you've done such an amazing job at helping with so much of the stuff that people don't see, and like making sure that the show actually goes off and that we actually have cool stuff to talk about, and doing prep for the show. And it would absolutely not be the same without you, because I cannot talk about Bitcoin and Satoshi like you can at all. And I always enjoy listening to you when you hit that moment and you just have to go off. But yeah, we can bring it back a little bit. I also, I guess one last thing, it's been interesting to me. It was just like trying to figure out, I always obsess so much about kind of creatively, like, what do I want to say? It's been something that's like really, really challenging for me, that I think a lot of people struggle with, but just in particular, I feel like I've always been a person with ideas and with motivation and creativity, but just when it comes to actually delivering something and like, like what do I have to say? What is the one thing I want to tell the world? I just find that problem just like absolutely crippling. And for a long time, I really avoided writing about crypto and like podcasting about it, because I feel like that's my job. Like, I'm not sure that shows my like creative side. And it's just like, it's not clever enough. It's like too obvious. Like, I think it would do well, but it's like, it's not, I'm not sure if it's like what I really want my life to be. And eventually I kind of gave in to the impulse of like, okay, I'm going to try it. And, started writing on Twitter, started doing this podcast. And I think we've just seen that, like, at the very least, we're good at it. And, it's going well for us. And I think we've been able to impact so much of the community and be able to improve so many people's experience in Avalanche, that definitely it's something. I'm not sure it's necessarily the thing I want my life's work to be, creatively speaking, but I'm certainly having a lot of fun doing it right now.
And public speaking is a big fear that people have. I've read studies where it's one of the highest rated, concerns or fears that people have in a professional environment. People just don't like speaking. And even myself, having now done hundreds of presentations surely over the course of my entire career, somehow that's just something I fell into very early on. I was given presentations on HTML5 in like 2009, 2010, like way, 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 way early, talking about HTML5. And so, I want to encourage anybody out there, if they have that skill set, whether it's natural or whether you've gone to school and taken courses on it or whatever, you should leverage it. Being able to give public presentations does a lot for your career. It builds your social equity amongst your peers and amongst, the public at large. It can help you, be perceived as and then ultimately grow into a subject matter expert on a field. So, if you can explain it to other people in a way that they can internalize it and grok it, then that means you've got it as well, right? Because if you can't explain it in a super, super simple way, then you're missing some fundamental. And it's just opened tons of doors. The Subnet show again, how many people came up to us in Barcelona and were just like, "What's up?" All of those opportunities to deep dive and connect with these people. And so if anybody's out there and they feel like they have a skill at this, especially in the context of Avalanche, I know Connor tweeted out just today. I think he gave a list. He gave a cool thread today, and one of the lists was more content in the Avalanche ecosystem. Other than Cedar Nets and the Subnet show, there's not much. And of course, there's other stuff, and I'm not stepping on people's toes if you're right now being like, what about us? There's just not a ton, let's say. And that's a bunch of it is bespoke, and there's not a lot of communities. And so, in the context of the Avalanche ecosystem, we want to see more content producers. We want to see it not just podcasts, but everything you can imagine, from meetups to more dapps, to everything you can, to even people doing social media streams and newsletters and whatever you can come up with. We need more content in the Avalanche ecosystem. If you go out and look at some of these Bitcoin bloggers and Ethereum bloggers, there's some huge networks out there, hundreds of thousands of followers following some of these Bitcoin podcasters, and there's not that happening yet in Avalanche. So it's a really big opportunity. So if you hear me and you're hearing my voice right now, there's a big opportunity, man, and I say make the move. I'm not the kind of person who gets jealous or anything like that. I know that jealousy is just like poison. So I don't, if I see somebody else doing something that's successful in an ecosystem that I'm competing in, I encourage them, because number one, competition will just make me sharper. It'll force me to bring my A game. And if somebody out competes me, then that's good for the Avalanche ecosystem at large, because, that just means somebody's bringing their super A game somewhere. And, I want to see, I've said many times, I'm not a maxi. What I want is for the blockchain to fulfill its potential and to change the human condition in a positive way within my lifetime. And so if it happens to be the technology that I'm working on, that's great. If it happens to be another group, that's great as well, because in this end game where the blockchain fulfills the potential as I see it, it's going to be hugely positive on people. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of encourage people out there. If you, if you have a skill set, don't be afraid to do public speaking, get over that. And then it can take your career leaps and bounds forward. But I kind of wanted to steer back on track. So give me your high level.
The only thing I would add there is that don't let not having the skill set be an obstacle for you either. If this is something that you want to do, just do it, and like you will get better. You will like learn and grow as you need to. And I like, if you look at the statistics on YouTubers, like how many videos does the average account have to make before they hit 1,000 subscribers? It's like 50 on average. Like, and then if you look at like how long till they get 10,000, like a million, it's an incredibly large number. It's in the hundreds, it's in the thousands. These people aren't overnight sensations. Like most of the time when you make videos, they suck at first, honestly. And if you look at like our podcast still kind of sucks a little bit. Like we definitely don't have the best production quality. We don't have the best audio. We don't always have HD video. We don't do edits with like intros and stuff right now. Hopefully we'll get to that one day. But if you look at some of it, a lot of it's improved over the last 6 months. So like look at our thumbnails. We had no thumbnails. Then we had crappy thumbnails. Now we have like ones that I think look decent. They're not the greatest ones in the world, but I can throw them together in under an hour. So, and I think they look pretty good. So, you can constantly improve, and don't feel like you're not good enough to start now, because that's the opposite of how it works. You start and then you get good. You don't get good, then you start. But yeah, so I think now we want to switch gears and Talk about dapps.
I wanted to hear about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the Dapp Squad. Yeah, what was your journey like? What do you remember? What sticks out?
Yeah, I mean, I think the good for me was, I think this
How
was
did
my
it
first
start? Before you
time.
even get there, how did the Dapp Squad start? You were working on Pangolin externally, right? And wasn't it called Avox Swap or something like that?
Yeah, so that was like my initial idea, and I kind of started it like right before I joined, and then kind of like brought it to fruition at my first little bit at the company, and then we kind of handed it off to the community team that stepped up and did the governance proposal. So prior to coming to Ava Labs, I had never worked on a product focused company. My previous job was very much on like research and exploratory work where the end deliverable was either like a proof of concept piece of code or like a paper or something like that. So we didn't interface with the public. We weren't like launching products. We didn't have users. We didn't have long-term support. And I was super excited about that. That I think that's been something that's been super cool for me. Um, actually having like the first pangolin launch and like having people use something that I built and basically built exclusively. I mean, I had a little bit of help, but like it was mostly me at first. Now it's very different. Like the totally different team that runs it. They're doing an amazing job. Um, but that initial work. And like having that first launch and then having it crash like almost the whole chain. Those were like exciting times. But like that's
What
the
was
kind
the
of the cool
story
stuff
there?
that happens.
There was naive implementations in the C chain, or what was the deal?
Oh, so what happened was Penguin was the first DApp of any consequence on the C chain. Shout out to Zero Exchange for launching like 2 days before us or a week before us or whatever. But unfortunately, they weren't able to gain the same amount of users that we were when Penguin dropped. But yeah, when the Avalanche bridge launched, the Avalanche Ethereum bridge launched, and Pangolin launched, like all of a sudden we had users. Like there was a little bit of traffic on the C chain, but probably like closer to like a block every couple minutes, if that. I'm not sure how much of that traffic was super real versus people experimenting or just running bots, because it was pretty cheap to do so. And then when Pangolin launched, we actually had real users. We actually had a use case, and people were like using the chain for the first time. And so we were just finally hitting these race conditions that had been in the code that just we hadn't caught. And so we hit a race condition that there's an in-depth write-up somewhere in the Avalanche Medium archives. I can't tell you the exact details of the issue, but 24 hours after the Pangolin launch, the C chain halted for
Is
almost
that
48
from when
hours.
Patrick emerged from the rubble and became the VP? Is that this?
Yeah,
Okay, gotcha.
basically.
Yeah, I gotcha. I know what you're talking about. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah, that was a crazy time. But yeah, the role changed a lot. So my first, I also was not in crypto full time before this. I was really into crypto back in like 2014, redipped back in like 2016, 2017. Then at my previous job, the funding just dried up and I didn't have the opportunities. So I very much missed out on the first DeFi summer and like the rise of like Uniswap and DeFi. And so when I kind of like saw this opportunity with Avalanche launching, that's when I like really started to get in the game for real. I mean, I built some like toy Solidity contracts, but I hadn't done something that I ever expected would hold people's money. And so that was really, scary, and, pushing to production the first time, getting over the fear of like spending Avox. Now I'll just spend all kinds of company money and not worry about it. But back in the day, you actually sent me like 5 Avox or something like that to do my like initial like deploys and stuff like that. I'm like, I gotta safeguard this 5 Avox. So and like this is mainnet, this is real. And just getting over those nerves, that was a fun part of starting out, and then kind of transitioning. But I thought, like I say a lot, that crypto and like smart contracts in particular is an area where you can kind of become an expert in 6 months. And I feel like I say that because I felt like I became an expert like very quickly. just because there were so few people building in the space. But I feel like that's actually becoming like less and less true every day now. Like there's so many more people filing in that it's actually getting harder and harder to stand out. Whereas a year and a half ago, it actually wasn't that hard. And I was able to come in with like not a ton of experience in the space. I had a lot of experience like building interesting software with interesting architecture, but not so much like smart contracts, and then trying to like go into that space and figure out, okay, what is DeFi? What are the primitives? How do these fit together? And like really understand how exchange contracts work. And I felt like, I got pretty good at that. And I could tell that there just weren't a lot of other people around me who had that same skill set. Even on Twitter, this was like honestly before a lot of the really big MEV stuff came off and popped off, and people really started flexing online. So it really felt like, and you had to work for every little piece of knowledge, because there weren't these centralized repositories of knowledge. And I mean, honestly, there still aren't. There's not. Somebody posted recently on Twitter that there's like no Wikipedia entries for like all kinds of things. Like there's no like Uniswap entry. There's no like AMM entry. Like just all kinds of crazy stuff. Like these really basic things that are hugely impactful to the world right now. Like there's no Wikipedia page. There's no great tutorials for these things. And like even just like what tools to use. It's all like this like word of mouth stuff that I was just kind of scraping like from reading the right tweet at the right time. And that was a really cool environment. And I think getting to know a lot of the early builders in the space was also like really impactful for me. And getting to meet people like Jamari from Snowball and Justin at Pangolin, and see the people who are like the first ones willing to take the plunge and start building stuff, and having the ability to like grow up with them essentially. Because when we started out, we were all new. Like the people who came in were not ETH giants. Like these were not like, it's not like Uniswap came in and like, okay, now we're going to build like new protocols on you. No, it was the people who hadn't established themselves yet, and who were still learning themselves and doing things like before they were ready. And we made mistakes, like we all did, and we learned from them. But I think a lot of the really rewarding stuff has coming now that we've been on this journey for a year and a half or whatever, and getting to say like, oh man, like our class that all started at the same time, like we've all kind of grown up together. And this was one of the cool things at Summit, just seeing all these people who, I remember when your project started and had a terrible first week, but you survived that. And like now, like you're sponsoring giant things. And like, that's just like so cool to see.
Yeah. And I just want to kind of add to that. You want to find an ecosystem where your work can have an oversized impact. So to kind of build upon what he was saying, whenever, you can, at least previous, it's kind of different now because Avalanche is blowing up. But previously, you could come into Avalanche and you can have a big impact very quickly, because as he said, there just weren't a bunch of giants around. And that's just a good career advice. We happen to live during this time. I harp on it all the time, but the pace of change is accelerating so rapidly that there's just paradigm shifts and innovations happening all around us. So many different fields. I happen to vibe out on the blockchain because I just think it's such a cool ecosystem, but there's so much more than just the blockchain. And what you really want to do is you just want to position yourself where you can have an oversized impact. And if you kind of think about it like surfing, that these sets are going to come in eventually. And that if you simply just position yourself in the right place and kind of wait for the sets to break, eventually you're going to get that perfect wave and you can ride it all the way to the shore. It's very, very much like that with technology, because we just have all of these paradigm shifts that keep coming in towards the shore, and then they interact with each other and they amplify each other. And if you just position yourself, preparation meets opportunity. So if you just prepare yourself and put yourself in the right place and wait, man, you'll catch that wave, and it will change your life in a big way and have an impact on the world potentially. And so technology is just very, very cool in that way. And I've done that with myself. It was one of the reasons I bet so heavily on Avalanche. To me, it just seemed like the next wave. There it is. That's the wave I've been waiting on. Boom. And I caught it and it went off. So that was pretty awesome. And then the other vibe, the other thing I've been tossing out, I've mentioned it a couple times here, but I'll mention it again, is this idea of the startup of one. And I experienced that. So the same way Connor says he's confident in saying that you can show up and be an expert in 6 months because he did it. He knows for sure it's possible because he actually did that. And I say the same thing about this startup of one or two. We've known you can do startups of a couple people, think Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, think the guys from Google, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, think about Bill Gates and Paul Allen. But you can even do startups of one now. The APIs are so powerful, and you have wealth and equity built in as a primitive in the Web3 ecosystem. And so it's really, really easy for just one or two people to have a crazy, crazy radical impact. And so I just encourage everybody out there to really, really use this opportunity, use this chapter in your life to just create something absolutely amazing and change the world. There's never been a better idea to have a big idea and just go out and change the world. And so I say, do it. Whatever's holding you back, whatever trip up it is that you have in your mind, you don't have enough money, there's enough money. You care about what people think about you, don't care about what people think about you. Whatever it is, whatever trip up, just get rid of it, man. This is the greatest opportunity in all of human history. Every human that was ever born and lived and died wishes they had one more day in the sun, wishes they could just take that one more breath and one more heartbeat. And here we are. And we have all of this potential and all of this opportunity in front of us. And so I really, really, really just want to encourage you guys to go out and change the world in a big way. And so you started working on Pangolin, and it was definitely the catalyst of the C chain. We showed a couple weeks ago the chart that shows the 100 million transactions. And if you keep zooming in and go back to the very week that Connor launched Pangolin, you can quite literally see the spike. It's pretty awesome. Yeah, go ahead.
It's one of there's a couple like hockey stick curves in there. But that was definitely like the first one. From mainnet launch to the Pangolin launch, there was like very little transaction, probably like in the order of like tens of maybe a couple hundred transactions a day. Now we have like 1 million transactions a day. So like that's the differential in growth. But yeah, so one thing I'll also say is that I still think that Avalanche is still very early. And, I think just like when we very first started, I like the big fish in a small pond analogy. Because, if you start building on Ethereum, you're a small fish in a big pond. But when we started on Avalanche, it was literally, there was only 2 or 3 fish in the pond. And so if you just jumped in the ring, like pretty high chance of like success for some definition of success, not necessarily becoming $1 billion overnight, but getting potentially maybe tens of millions of dollars of protocol revenue, which would have put you like in the top 10 at the time. And I think we're still pretty small. Now it's maybe like 100 fish in the pond, not 3 or a few thousand.
Well, now the opportunity has shifted to subnets. So now there's subnets that have 1 or 2 fish in the pond. So this opportunity is just changed. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great point of, where is the cusp of innovation right now? And like, it's kind of gone back and forth a lot over the last year of like, well, what's like the most innovative thing in dapps and like, DeFi summer, it was DeFi, it was the AMMs, it was the lending protocols. I think then it started getting to be like bridges, and it started to be, and I mean, honestly, it's still bridges. Honestly, bridges are popping off now more than they have. I think we were early with the Avalanche bridge, but like there was kind of a first class back in like whenever like Chain Safe came out. Then we kind of came out in the middle, but there wasn't a lot of other work. It's not super innovative. There was a bit of different architectures with some of the liquidity bridges as opposed to lock and burn bridges. But now we're seeing like a new wave of kind of innovation with like layer 0 and like some of these other Stargate, Wormhole, a few of these other bridges. I mean, there's also, like NFTs blew up last year, and like all the different NFT marketplaces kind of came out of nowhere and looked at, different ways to sell and do auctions. And also there's just innovation with NFTs themselves. What can an NFT be? Last summer, I think, we had Loot come out, and Loot was totally unlike any NFT we'd seen before. We've seen a lot of generatives, but we've seen a lot of different types, but occasionally something comes out that's new. And the forefront of innovation has just been shifting constantly. So you just kind of have to look at, if you want to be the most innovative, like where is that happening, or what's going to be next? That's the real question. And I think subnets is a fantastic answer.
Yeah, I've been saying that in 1 year from now, the top 100 tokens on CoinMarketCap is going to be different. It's always different. It changes very, very radically and quickly. but the primary engine driving innovation is going to be subnets. Subnets are just such a powerful paradigm. Um, it just makes me so stoked for you, man, that you're now on the platform team working on subnets. I can think it's such a great job for you. I mean, I'm so jazzed for you. So let's talk about the platform team a little bit. What exactly is the platform team, and what are the bounds within it which it works?
It's intimidating, man. A lot of really smart folks, a lot
Some
of
block stars,
uh
some straight block
yeah,
stars on that team, for real.
straight block stars working on 10 million different things. The stand-ups literally have like 20 people in them. So it's a very different environment. One of the other great experiences I had on the Dapp Squad was actually getting to put a team together and do some hiring, my own, and actually go from being the only person uh, doing this work to getting up to like 5 people at our peak. And so we had some ups and downs there. Obviously, we had some people leave, we had some people not work out, but at the end, I thought we like actually got a really good rhythm, and we're able to establish some really good cadence, and just figuring out, we operated very independently, so we had a lot of freedom to figure out like what structures worked for us, and like how to really build that team from the ground up. And so it's a very different environment going into the platform team that has a lot more structure in it, a lot more rigidity in how things are run. It's very much like, do not derail the stand up is a message that I have gotten a lot.
The
Which
platform team
I'm
was
more
the
like,
first. It was the first team, wasn't it? Because
yeah, I mean Steven's
yeah,
employee
Steven
number
created
one. I mean,
Avalanche Go, right? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, all the teams kind of really came about at the same time. It's just where you were sitting at a different time. I used to be on the platform team technically, even though I was still doing Dapp stuff. Like before there was Hydra, I used to kind of attend the platform stand-ups, but then, it was kind of just like, there's 5 people here who are all doing different random things, and they need to talk to other people every day so that they don't go insane. So I'll just put them in a stand-up so that they can check in with people. But yeah, so it's very it's very different. So there's a lot going on because we have so many areas that we're working, and there's also so much code. There's also a lot of legacy code, especially. So I'm working now on EVM based subnets. And so now I'm learning Geth for the first time. I know how to use the EVM, but I've never looked at the internals before, barring some small things here or there. So I'm
So
like
you're on
learning how the
Golang
state
every
trans.
day. You're on doing Golang every day. Okay.
Exactly. And so now I'm like diving into like, how do the state transitions actually work? How are transactions actually processed? How are blocks created? I had a funny moment the other day where I was talking to someone. I'm just like, why are you like doing all these like complex procedures? Like when you're testing this like transaction, why don't you just call like the like block creation API? It's just like, dude, this is the block creation API. We're testing. Like this is this is what it does. It's putting the block together.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. That's why you can't just call like send transaction. um, yeah. So I'm just so used to working at the application layer. Like going that one layer deeper is a totally new experience. But Geth has been around for 2015, so like 7 years now. So there's a lot of, and it's not just 7 years of minor updates. That code has gone through many lifetimes of changes, honestly. So
Yeah, I bet. And you're doing stateful precompiles, is that what you said?
yeah.
Mhm.
So I've been getting spun up, but I think my focus going forward is going to be on kind of creating custom subnets and working with partners, as well as doing some internal innovation for how can we make sure that we're creating cool subnets and not just creating copies of the C chain, because that's not really useful. Those are just side chains. But like, can we do things that are like actually innovative, or things that are useful to enable our partners' use cases? And so we had Aaron on a few episodes ago to talk about stateful precompiles, and we actually have a few now. We have 2 that are kind of live on the website, and I have a third that I'm working on that'll be live soon. I'll give you guys a little teaser. But so the first precompile that we created was to allow a smart contract to mint the native asset on the subnet. So this would be like the C chain having a contract that could mint AVOX, or on the new DeFi Kingdom subnet, they have a contract that can mint Joule. And why is this useful? Why is this necessary? Well, let's say you're an application, like let's say you're Pangolin, and you want to create a Pangolin subnet where PNG is the gas token. PNG already exists on the C chain. And if you want to bridge that PNG over to the Pangolin subnet, you have to be able to convert that ERC20 into the native asset somehow. And so what this precompile will allow you to do is have a bridge contract that, instead of minting an ERC20, will just allow you to mint native PNG. Or you might not do it through the bridge. You might just have a wrapper contract like reverse WAVOX that lets you
I've
go
never
from
even
the
heard of that.
ERC20
Did you say
to the native.
reverse Swavox? Is that what you just said? I've never heard that term before.
I just created it.
Very cool. So
basically,
yeah, go ahead.
WAVOX is used to go from the native asset to an ERC20 and back. Whereas like this precompile would allow you to create a contract that lets you go from an ERC20 and turn it into the native asset and then go back to the ERC20.
Wow. So if you today spin up your own subnet, you can say, I'm going to have Gabriel token be the asset. And so prior to this, you're saying I would have had to keep issuing on the primary subnet.
Yeah, so you would have had to mint, like, so let's say like DeFi Kingdom. So DeFi Kingdom's been around for like a year or something. I don't know how long they've been around. But they have their Joule token like already distributed. But they also wanted to use their Joule token as their gas token. And so if like they had to make those exchangeable, because they want existing Joule holders to be able to take their tokens to the new subnet and be usable as the gas token. And so the only other alternative would have been to like mint 1 billion, whatever the current circulating supply of Joule is, in the genesis of the subnet, and then like have that as like a liquidity bridge. But then you just have like this giant pre-mint with a stash of coins. That's maybe not the most elegant solution. But now, you can just have it so that whenever you bridge your Joule, instead of minting a brand new token that's an ERC20, you can actually just mint the native token, the AVOX equivalent, just Joule. And then you can use that as the gas token without having to make any modifications to how the subnet works.
Okay, I get it. That's huge. Is that live now, or that's something that's in R&D phase?
That's live. You can check that out on our Subnet EVM GitHub repo.
Very rad. Yeah, subnets are coming into focus. Again, I'm very, very jazzed if that's the project you landed on, because I have a feeling that you're going to just contribute so much there, and it benefits the subnet show, of course, because we got Connor plugged directly into the main vein of like the entire subnet journey and on the platform team. And so it's going to be really cool that you're going to have all the alpha. You're going to be the alpha machine.
But the real joke is that before we didn't know anything. We were just making stuff up on the show and then hoping that the platform team delivered. But now I'll actually have to start censoring myself, because I'll have to figure out what's
it's true.
What am I allowed to share? What am I not allowed to share?
It's true. Yeah.
So some of the other precompiles that we're working on. So we have another one that's live, which is a contract deployment restriction precompile, which actually allows you to restrict who can deploy contracts on your subnet. So for example, DeFi Kingdom created their subnet.
Mm-hmm.
They deployed their DeFi Kingdom contracts. They also let their partners deploy their DEX contracts. But they don't want just a random person to like launch their NFT project on their DeFi Kingdom subnet. No, it's like they don't want other applications to compete with them for traffic.
Mm-hmm.
So what this allows you to do is basically create a whitelist that will allow you to allow specific accounts to deploy smart contracts to the chain and block all other people from issuing contract or deploying contracts.
Yeah, that's huge. And I don't know if that speaks directly to regulatory compliance. Maybe that's a bit of a stretch to leap into that area, but it kind of plays into that of just being able to have complete control over your subnet and simply saying, like you said, a whitelist or a blacklist of saying, this is what we want, this is what we don't want. And we have, direct control over who can do that. That's very cool.
And then, so I'll tease a little bit alpha. It's not huge, but so I'm working on a third precompile now. Almost done with it. I'm not sure when it'll go in a release, but so I'm working on a precompile that is doing the same kind of thing, creating an allow list, a whitelist for actually just interacting with the chain at all. So just to issue transactions. So if you wanted to create a subnet where only you and I could interact with it, you can now do that. So yeah, more regulatory compliance kind
So
of
that would
stuff.
whitelist it by address, presumably.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Wow, yeah, that's
And
huge.
then you can have admins. Admins can add other users, things like that.
Wow, very
Contracts could add users.
crazy, very exciting. I wonder at what point will the changes be? I'm thinking this in real time, so it's not a fleshed out thought. At what point will there be backwards compatibility issues? So I guess in theory, all of these precompiles can be toggled on or off. And if somebody spins up an EVM subnet and they don't have the precompile, which you just mentioned, and somebody tried to do something interacting with some form of code path that required that precompile, I'm guessing it just throws some type of error or something.
Yeah. So if you choose not to, so the way that it works now in Subnet EVM is basically there is a JSON file that you use to create your subnet. And you can choose which precompiles you want to have enabled and which you don't. And so not all EVM subnets are going to be the same. They're all going to be slightly different. And not just, how fast they run or like how cheap their gas is. There actually can be some functional differences. And so if the precompile is not enabled, then it will just throw up like a function not found error essentially whenever you try to call it, or it just won't make that check. So you don't have to worry about it necessarily not being in your chain. So
Right.
I mean, maybe the question is, what happens when you launch your subnet and then I write a cool precompile for you, and now you've already gone live, but now you have something that you want to incorporate. How do you do that upgrade process? So I'm not sure if I think adding a precompile post launch would require a hard fork.
Uh-huh.
So you'd have to get the majority of your validators to update. But yeah, so like I think that's like some of the stuff that still needs to be worked out a bit. It's like, what does that upgrade process look like? How do we roll out new versions of the subnets? So right now, basically the way the upgrade process works for Avalanche Go is whenever we release a new code version, we try to release it sufficiently. Yeah. So if it's a optional update, we just release it to the public, but with no kind of like upgrade time. But when we do try to do a hard fork, we try to give people plenty of notice, and we say that like in 2 weeks at timestamp whatever, the new rules are going to go into effect. And so we try to get everyone to update their client by that point in time. And so there is kind of like a DevOpsy like procedure of like, how do you do these upgrades? How do you set up doing hard forks? Which I'm not sure if we've really kind of made that clear or easy through like documentation and process. So there's a lot that we need to provide for the community for informing them the best practices for developing subnets and what tooling do they need. And I think that's some of the stuff I'm actually going to spend time on early on, is helping write some of that documentation. Is I'm just figuring out, how do you write a precompile from scratch? I don't know. I'm still trying to figure that out. But when I figure it out, I want to put it in a document, make it publicly available, have a good repo or docs page, so that I'm coming into this just as fresh as anybody else. So try to figure out what are the troubles that I run into, and then just try to write up as many of those as I can, so that we can really streamline the community experience.
And I wonder about what are the chances of having a function that clobbers an existing precompile. I know that currently, I believe we auto increment from 1 or 2. So, the hex string of the contract is like 0000001. So, I can imagine randomly generating that is going to be pretty rare, but it's no more rare than randomly generating any other contract name, I suppose. They just look more unique because they've got all the ones. But if somebody accidentally, if the laws of random nature were on their side and they clobbered an existing precompile, that would probably be a bad scenario, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about that
It's
too much. I don't think
astronomical. I'm
there's,
guessing the odds of
yeah,
it happening are absolutely astronomical. Yeah,
randomly, yeah, that's pretty insignificant.
sure.
Most of the dresses are, yeah, you have to decide like what they're going to be like ahead of time.
Do you get to
And
choose?
yeah,
Oh, because yeah, we were talking about
well,
potentially having like a registry or something, right?
so in Subnet EVM, the what we've provided, we have chosen for you,
Right.
but you can launch a subnet using anything you want. You don't have to use Subnet EVM. You're free to modify it however you want. And so like you can create your own custom precompiles. Like you can take ours and like mess with them. There is no permissioning system here. Like you don't have to use what we're providing. We are just providing tools that are convenient to help you. But you know, they should be not constraining, but freeing.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it. Not constraining but freeing. That's a nice little way to wrap it up. I think we can kind of say not constraining but freeing, and that's the way we want to have all of our tooling being. We want you to feel like you're freed up and that you can take your ideas and go from idea to application 10 times faster than the competition. That would be a good way to say it. So it has been an hour, and I like to be respectful of everybody's time, including and especially Connor. So I think we're going to bring it to a close. We will pass the mic around one last time. So any last minute thoughts, Connor?
Yeah, no, I'm really excited for some of the new directions. And I know I talked to a lot of people at Summit, and I was kind of just like, I literally don't know what I'm doing next because there's, you know, a little bit of uncertainty. And so now I know, and it feels good to have a direction and starting to, you know, work with a different, you know, sector of the company. And so I'm getting to know a whole new batch of people and getting to do some like new challenging work. And yeah, it's certainly not easy, but this is like I said earlier, it's just like if you learn a lot, it means it was hard. But if it's hard, you're going to learn a lot.
Yeah.
And I am really excited to, you know, stay in that innovative space, stay in that creative space, but at the same time, go back to our roots a little bit and learn more about Geth, learn more about the internals of how chains work, because I know that's only going to make me a stronger developer. And I think that it's going to be a really good move for me personally. I hope so. Hopefully, I'll still be saying that a year from now.
Yeah, seeing how your skills matured right in front of my eyes with regards to your Dapp skills, you know, coming on board, working on Penguin, and then ultimately you guys did so many cool things. We didn't even get to touch on most of them, but a lot of cool projects came out of the Dapp Squad, of course, being driven, you know, by Connor and other people as well, but being driven by Connor. Connor helped spec out the roadmaps. Connor reviewed all the code. He helped on ramp people and train them. I think it's going to be hugely rewarding putting you into the subnet zone and having you really internalize that technology. I think I'm myself am looking forward to some of the cool stuff you create over the next however long. So I think that was a super huge win for Ava Labs and for the Avalanche ecosystem. Just if I were outside and I were just looking at the pieces falling into place and who does what, having Connor Daly do subnet stuff, I think is a huge win. So congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, and with regards to myself, yeah, we're growing the developer relations team. I believe we're at 6 now. We just got another engineer, somebody from the Dapp Squad, who was a huge win, one of my favorite people to work with at Ava Labs, and now he's working on the same squad as myself. And so we've got a ton going on there, and I believe we're still looking to hire even more. We're trying to grow the team out at a nice organic pace. We don't want to break what we've got, which is really good. And so, you know, every time we add a new dynamic, it's like adding a new flavor to a recipe. You know, might we change the recipe? Well, we don't want to change it if it's, you know, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. But at the same time, the Avalanche ecosystem is growing so quickly, and the role that developer relations plays is just an important role. You know what I mean? Our bread and butter is developers entering into the ecosystem. And so having the right people in place and the right tooling and processes in place is super critical. And every single day I get a dozen DMs or more from people asking about how this works, how can they do this, who can they connect with who, what's up with what. And so, you know, the role that we play is just very critical in helping to on-ramp people and hold their hand. And I don't mean that in any pejorative way. I mean that in the nicest possible way. You know, we are here to on-ramp people and to hold their hand and to help them enter the ecosystem. And so if you have any questions at all, obviously reach out to myself on Twitter or on Telegram or on Slack. You guys know Discord, of course, chat.avox.network, you know, all the channels. And so this week, I wanted to pass the mic back to Connor. I was going to let Connor sign us out. So for myself, we'll be back next week. We're back on track. We got a really great guest next week. You guys are going to be absolutely jazzed. So I will see you guys next week. Connor, take it away.
Yeah, and so just as always, well, before we totally play ourselves out, you always have to share the Twitter, because this
Yes,
is always
yes, yes.
somebody's
You're good.
first
You're good. You're good.
episode. So people can definitely follow you at CG Cardona, and I am Das_Connor, DAS_CONNOR. There's a lot of ways to spell Connor, but that is the correct one. So now, as we always like to say here, from Snowflake to Avalanche and through consensus to the stars. See you later, everybody.